So here's the point where you should be now. You have attached your bodice together, fronts to backs at the shoulders. You have also cut out and fused your interfacing to your pieces. These two should be opposite pieces, and you should have one piece here. Your interfacing should have been ironed on to the wrong side of the fabric, so make sure that you've done that. Now you see some of my interfacing is kind of hanging off here. Okay, that does happen occasionally. If you want to trim that off, you can. Sometimes it does make it easier to sew it. If not, that is fine as well. This edge is actually going to get serged eventually anyway, so you don't really need to do that. So your next step, since we have that done, we don't need to worry about this for now. Our next step here with the facings is you're going to turn your front facing. Okay, it's the big one. You're going to turn it right side up. You're going to put your back facings and attach them at the shoulders. You're going to have one that looks like that, and you're going to have one that looks like that. Okay, so that's how they're attached. You sew it from here, and then from here, there. Okay, make sure you backstitch. Use a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and after you do that, you're going to press that open. Okay, so here is my facing that has been stitched together. Okay, stitch to the shoulders. Here's the wrong side. I did press it open. Okay, so from here, what you're going to do now next is serge the outside around the edge of the big curve. Now, sometimes patterns will tell you to finish this with a zigzag edge. Some patterns will tell you to fold it like that and stitch all the way around, folding it all the way around. But since we have access to a serger, we don't have to do that. We can just serge. We're going to serge from this point here all the way up to this point here. Don't worry about serging those and around the center here. Okay, so here's my facing all serged around the outside edge. When you are serging, try not to cut any of this off. As I was serging, I did trim off some of my interfacing so it just looks a little nicer. Okay, so now we're going to use this piece, and we're going to go back to this piece here. So I am going to turn the bodice, your front and backs that have been sewn together. I'm going to turn that over so you have the right sides facing up. Okay. And then I'm going to take my facing piece and I'm going to lay that on top. Now, I purposely did my facing piece in a different color so you would have an idea, so you'd be able to see it better. So basically, usually your pattern will tell you to match seams first. In this case, this is true. Okay, it looks like I got a little bit of a problem. There we go. To match your seams first, so I'm going to take this one, this shoulder seam, and match it to this shoulder seam here, seam to seam. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stick a pin in it. Okay. And then I'm going to do the same one to this other seam. Okay, so this shoulder seam to the shoulder seam, same thing, and pin it. Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and match up here and pin that. I'm going to match over here and pin that. So make sure that your fabric is edge to edge. Okay, and then you're going to have to do this one here. Okay, it should fit exactly on this particular one. Okay, and one more pin for me. Okay, so all I've done here is I've pinned down the facing. I matched this seam to the shoulder seam right here. I did that first. Then I matched the ends here, and then I just filled in the pins here. Okay, so this is your neck edge. So what I'm going to do next is sew this around 5/8. Make sure you do backstitch at the ends and use a regular stitch length of 2 or 2.5. Okay, so there you see I stitched this on. I did use black thread just so you could see it. Normally you would want to match your thread to your garment. So what I'm going to do now to make this look nice when it's flipped over to the inside is I'm going to do a thing called clipping. Okay, clipping is simply making little slash marks in the seam allowance, and what that does is it helps make this curve a smooth curve when you flip it to the inside. Okay, so all you do for clipping, okay, and you do that on any inside curve. This is an outside curve, you'd be doing something different. Okay, so I'm simply going to clip, and I'm going to clip kind of close to my stitching there. Okay, it doesn't have to be too close to each other, but just about every 1.5 to 2 inches around. Okay. Okay, so I went ahead and clipped, and then the next thing you're going to be doing is actually flipping this to the inside. Okay, this can be a challenge, but basically it's mostly I do it at the ironing board. Okay, so if you flip it in, okay, and you want to press it really nice and flat. Okay, so this can be a challenge. I've actually flipped it to the inside, and now I'm going to take my facing and flip it to the inside just like that, and I'm causing it to be laying flat like that. I'm going to press this edge right there, okay, using some steam. Okay. Okay, so now it's nice and flat there. Okay, and I'm going to continue around. Now, like I said, this is going to be a challenge. You have to kind of play with your fabric a little bit. Okay, and kind of roll that out. Get it to lay flat. Okay, just like that. Okay, so there's that next little section. Okay, I'm just going to keep going around. Again, this is not a fast process. You do not want this to be pressed and wrinkled, because whatever you see on this side, you're going to see on the other side if you're not careful. Okay, so I'm going to keep going around. At this point, I'm going to kind of go ahead and start at the other end. The straight end. Okay. And now that kind of helps the rest of it lay down. Okay. There you see, it's all nice and flat. Okay, if you look at it, oops, sorry about that. If you look at it from the right side, you see now this is all finished off now. Okay, I probably could have pressed it a little better in some of these places. You can always go back and fix that. Okay, so that is how you get the facing on. Okay, now on some pattern instructions, because sometimes these don't, lay as flat. This is really nice. This is just basic, nice, stiff cotton, so it's laying really nicely. But if it's not laying nicely, then it's going to have you stitch your facing to various points in your garment. So for example, you'd want to stitch down this facing to the seam allowance, and then again over here. This is done with hand sewing. Okay, and generally you want to have thread that matches. I am using black thread, but you're not going through the garment itself. You're only going to be going through the seam allowance. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead first and just come up through my facing. Okay, we're going to be doing a whip stitch here. Remember, a whip stitch is where you go around. Okay, and again, I've only sewn that through my seam allowance. There's no stitches here on the other side. Okay, so I'm going through just my seam allowance again. You're going to want to do this a couple of times. Through just your seam allowance. Okay, my stitch is not the best. It's kind of hard to work around the camera. Okay. So now if you had more seam allowances where you could stitch this down, you could certainly do that. Again, the stitch should look a little better than that, but you see it's not on the other side here. Then you would just knot that off, and then you would do the other side, and then that would be done at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and finish the other side and show you your last step for today's assignment. So I've tacked down both these sides. So when a pattern tells you to tack something down, this is simply what they mean. It just simply means doing a few stitches to keep something in its place. Okay, so now we're going to do the side seams of the little shirt here. Okay. So this is the front, these are the backs. I'm going to simply fold that kind of in half. Okay, I'm going to pin these two together here. On one side. I'm going to pin them on the other side as well. Okay, just like that. Okay, on the sides, I'm going to sew that with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Then you are going to press it. Okay, and that will get us set up for what we're going to do with the sleeve holes. Now, some patterns will have you actually do facings similar to this for a sleeveless garment, and some patterns will have you do bias tape, which is actually what we're going to do. It's another way to face something. Okay, so when you flip it right side out after doing that side seam, you've got what looks like a little shirt that opens in the back. Okay, side seams are done, the neck edge is all finished, and it looks like a little shirt that's going to open in the back.